I am Ms.Carmina. Excuse me. This is Ms.Carmina Reads Live, and today we will continue reading Gateway to the Epicureans, Epicurus, Lucretius, and their modern heirs, edited with a preface by Spencer A. Klavan. I will reread the same section that I read on the last video because I noticed that my microphone is not working perfectly yet. Therefore, I will delete that previous video probably and read this one. Again, this section is called David Hume, An Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding, 1948. Section 11, of a particular providence and of future state. All right, so yeah, the other thing I wanted to say, I apologize if it's noisy. I hear it, I don't know if you all hear it, but my coworkers are having guests over or whatever. I don't know what's going on out there. It's pretty loud. So it should not be any bother to us though. Here in italics, Spencer A. Klavan says, Hume makes Epicurus defend his belief that the orderly construction of nature offers no warrant for believing in an omnipotent or benevolent creator. He raises and disputes many of the typical objections to Epicureanism, including that it generates moral laxity. He also coyly suggests that his own arguments might lead not simply to denying God's benevolence and omnipotence, but to denying his existence outright. All right? So, as you all shuffle in and out of this video, as it is the nature of things, yes, I welcome all of you. I welcome everybody from anywhere in the country or in the world. I am in California, so as you're watching, remember to give me a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe if you want to see me again, and any super chats or anything that you want to send me, I appreciate it full-heartedly. Love you all. Let's get started. Here it begins. 102. I was lately engaged in conversation with a friend who loves skeptical paradoxes, where, though he advanced many principles of which I can by no means approve, yet as they seem to be curious and to bear some relation to the chain of reasoning carried on throughout this inquiry, I shall here copy them from my memory as accurately as I can, in order to submit them to the judgment of the reader. Our conversation began with my admiring the singular good fortune of philosophy, which, as it requires entire liberty above all other privileges, and chiefly flourishes from the free opposition of sentiments and argumentation, received its birth in an age and country of freedom and toleration, and was never cramped, even in its most extravagant principles, by any creeds, concessions, or penal statutes. For, except the banishment of Protagoras and the death of Socrates, which last event proceeded partly from other motives, there are scarcely any instances to be met with in ancient history of this bigoted jealousy with which the present age is so much infested. Epicurus lived at Athens to an advanced age, in peace and tranquility. Epicureans were even admitted to receive the sacerdotal character and to officiate at the altar in the most sacred rites of the established religion. And the public encouragement of pensions and salaries was afforded equally by the wisest of the Roman emperors to the professors of every sect of philosophy. How requisite such kind of treatment was to philosophy in her early youth will easily be conceived if we reflect that, even at present, when she may be supposed more hardy and robust, she bears with much difficulty the inclemency of the seasons, and those harsh winds of calumny and persecution which blow upon her. I see your hearts. Thank you for that. Welcome everybody, and thanks for joining me. Gather around and listen. You admire, says my friend, as the singular good fortune of philosophy, what seems to result from the natural course of things, and to be unavoidable in every age and nation. This pertinacious bigotry of which you complain, as so fatal to philosophy, is really her offspring, who, after allying with superstition, separates himself entirely from the interest of his parent, and becomes her most inveterate enemy and persecutor. Speculative dogmas of religion, the present occasion of such furious disputes, could not possibly be conceived or admitted in the early ages of the world, when mankind, being wholly illiterate, formed an idea of religion more suitable to their weak apprehension, and composed their sacred tenets of such tales chiefly as were the main objects of traditional belief, more than the argument of disputation. More than the argument or disputation. After the first alarm, therefore, was over, which arose from the new paradoxes and principles of the philosophers, these teachers seem ever after, during the ages of antiquity, to have lived in great harmony with the established superstition, and to have a fair partition of mankind between them, the former claiming all the learned and wise, and the latter possessing all the vulgar and illiterate. Hello, Vard. What is your question? Please ask it, and I will answer if I can. Mayo or ketchup? Mayo and ketchup, of course. And a little bit of mustard, if there's a pickle. Illiterate, okay. 103. It seems then, say I, that you leave politics entirely out of the question, and never suppose that a wise magistrate can justly be jealous of certain tenets of philosophy, such as those of Epicurus, which, denying a divine existence and consequently a providence and future state, seem to loosen, in a great measure, the ties of morality, and may be supposed, for that reason, pernicious to the peace of civil society. Hi, Bebito Malo. Welcome back. Haven't seen you in a while. Good to have you. I know, replied he, that in fact these persecutions never in any age proceed from calm reason, or from experience of the pernicious consequences of philosophy, but arose entirely from passion and prejudice. But what if I should advance farther and assert that if Epicurus had been accused before the people by any of the sycophants or informers of those days, they could easily have defended his cause and proved his principles of philosophy to be as salutary as those of his adversaries, who endeavored with such zeal to oppose him to the public hatred and jealousy? I wish, said I, you would try your eloquence upon so extraordinary a topic, and make a speech of Epicurus, which might satisfy not the mob of Athens, if you will allow that ancient city and polite city to have contained any mob, but the more philosophical part of his audience, such as might be supposed capable of comprehending his arguments. The matter would not be difficult upon such conditions, replied he, and if you please, I shall suppose myself Epicurus for a moment, and make you stand as the Athenian people, and shall deliver you such an harangue as will fill the urn with white beans, and leave not a black one to gratify the malice of my adversaries. Very well, pray proceed upon these suppositions. I miss you too, Bebito Malo. You are quantum leaping at the moment? Aren't we all? Well, I hope that you have subscribed to my channel by now, Bebito Malo. Hit me with a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed. I want to see you more often. Do we know each other in person? Maybe. I don't know. Reveal yourself. 104. I come hither, O ye Athenians, to justify in your assembly what I maintained in my school, and I find myself impeached by furious antagonists, instead of reasoning with calm and dispassionate inquirers. Your deliberations, which of right should be directed to questions of public good and the interest of the commonwealth, are diverted to the disquisitions of speculative philosophy, and these magnificent but perhaps fruitless inquiries take place of your more familiar but more useful occupations. But so far as in me lies, I will prevent this abuse. We shall not hear disputes concerning the origin and government of worlds. We shall only inquire how far such questions concern the public interest, and if I can persuade you that they are entirely indifferent to the peace of society and security of government, I hope that you will precisely send us back to our schools, there to examine at leisure the question in the most sublime, but at the same time the most speculative of all philosophy. Oh my goodness. I know who you are now. That's my best friend right there, everybody. All right, I shall continue. The religious philosophers, not satisfied with the tradition of your forefathers, a doctrine of your priests, in which I willingly acquiesce, indulge a rash curiosity in trying how far they can establish religion upon principles of reason, and they thereby excite instead of satisfying the doubts which naturally arise from a diligent and scrutinous inquiry. They paint in the most magnificent colors the order, beauty, and wise arrangement of the universe, and then ask if such a glorious display of intelligence could proceed from the fruitless concourse of atoms, or if chance could produce what the greatest genius can never sufficiently admire. I shall not examine the justness of this argument. I shall allow it to be as solid as my antagonists and accusers can desire. It is sufficient if I can prove, from this very reasoning, that the question is entirely speculative, and that when, in my philosophical disquisitions, I deny a providence and a future state, I undermine not the foundations of society, but advance principles which they themselves, upon their own topics, if they argue consistently, must allow to be solid and satisfactory. I love you too. Yay, thank you for subscribing. Booksim, welcome. 105. You then, who are my accusers, have acknowledged that the chief of sole argument for a divine existence, which I never questioned, is derived from the order of nature, where there appears such marks of intelligence and design, that you think it extravagant to assign for its cause either chance or the blind and unguided force of matter. You allow that this is an argument drawn from effects to causes. From the order of the work, you infer that there must have been project and forethought in the workman. If you cannot make this point, you allow that your conclusion fails, and you pretend not to establish the conclusion in a greater latitude than the phenomena of nature will justify. These are your concessions. I desire you to mark the consequences. Thank you, Bebito Malo. I appreciate your I appreciate your tips, your super chats, your stars, your gold coins, makeup brush. Oh my goodness, I am wearing makeup. That's true. Oh my goodness. Thank you. When we infer any particular cause from an effect, we must proportion the one. Oh my goodness. You know, the first time that you sent me a flower, I was like, what? This guy is flirting with me? No, it was you. Hey, love right back to you from Northeast India from California, Southern California. Matrix, thanks for joining us. Hit the like or the thumbs up and subscribe so you can see me again. Let me continue reading. When we infer any particular cause from an effect, we must proportion the one to the other, and can never be allowed to ascribe to the cause any qualities from what are exactly sufficient to produce the effect. A body of 10 ounces raised in any scale may serve as proof that the counterbalancing weight exceeds 10 ounces, but can never afford a reason that it exceeds 100. If the cause assigned for any effect if the cause assigned for any effect may not sufficient to produce it, if the cause assigned to any effect be not sufficient to produce it, we must either reject that cause or add it to such qualities as will give it a just proposition to the effect. But if we ascribe to it farther qualities or affirm it capable of producing other effects, we can only indulge the license of conjecture, and arbitrarily suppose the existence of qualities and energies without reason or authority. The same rule holds whether the cause assigned be brute unconscious matter or irrational intelligent being. If the cause be known only by the effect, we never ought to ascribe to it any qualities beyond what are precisely requisite to produce the effect, nor can we, by any rules of just reasoning, return back to the cause and infer other effects from it, beyond those by which alone it is known to us. No one merely from the sight of one of Susse's pictures could know that he was also a sanctuary or architect, and was an artist no less skillful in stone and marble than in colors. The talents and tastes displayed in the particular work before us, these we may safely conclude the workman to be possessed of. The cause must be proportioned to the effect, and if we exactly and precisely proportion it, we shall never find in it any qualities that point farther or afford any inference concerning any other design or performance. Such qualities must be somewhat beyond what is merely requisite for producing the effect which we examine. Hey, Bebito Malo, send me a message on the DM, so tell me what's up with your life and everything. But I will continue reading so I can finish this section before my lunch is over. This is 106, everybody. Allowing, therefore, the gods to be the authors of the existence or order of the universe, it follows that they possess that precise degree of power, intelligence, and benevolence, which appears in their workmanship. But nothing further can ever be proved, except we call in the assistance of exaggeration and flattery to supply the defects of arguments and reasoning. So far as the traces of any attributes are at present appear, so far may we conclude these attributes to exist. The supposition of further attributes is mere hypothesis, much more the supposition that in distant regions of space or periods of time there has been or will be a more magnificent display of these attributes, and a scheme of administration more suitable to such imaginary virtues. We can never be allowed to mount up from the universe the effect of Jupiter, the cause, and then descend downwards to infer any new effect from that cause, as if the present effects alone were not entirely worthy of the glorious attributes which we ascribe to that deity. The knowledge of the cause being derived solely from the effect, they must be exactly adjusted to each other, and the one can never refer to anything farther or be the foundation of any new inference and conclusion. Oh, I'll check for the messages. You find certain phenomena in nature. You seek a cause or author. You imagine that you have found him. You afterwards become so enamored of this offspring of your brain that you imagine it impossible, but he must produce something greater and more perfect than the present scene of things, which is so full of ill and disorder. You forget that this superlative intelligence and benevolence are entirely imaginary, or at least without any foundation in reason, and that you have no ground to ascribe him any qualities but what you see he has actually exerted and displayed in his productions. Let your gods, therefore, O philosophers, be suited to the present appearance of nature, and presume not to alter these appearances by arbitrary suppositions in order to suit them to the attributes which you so fondly ascribe to your deities. I don't know what that is. (107) When priests and poets, supported by your authority, O Athenians, talk of a golden or silver age which preceded the present state of vice and misery, I hear them with attention and with reverence. But when philosophers who pretend to neglect authority and to cultivate reason hold the same discourse, I pay them no. I pay them not. I own the same obsequious submission and pious deference. I ask, who carried them into the celestial regions? Who admitted them into the councils of the gods? Who opened to them the book of fate, that they thus rashly affirm that their deities have executed or will execute any purpose beyond what has actually appeared? If they tell me that they have mounted on the steps or by the gradual ascent of reason, and by drawing inferences from effects to causes, I still insist that they have aided the ascent of reason by the wings of imagination. Otherwise, they could not thus change their manner of inference, and argue from causes to effects, presuming that a more perfect production than the present world would be more suitable to such perfect beings as the gods, and forgetting that they have no reason to ascribe to these celestial beings any perfection or any attribute but what can be found in the present world. Hence, all the fruitless industry to account for the ill appearances of nature and save the honor of the gods, while we must acknowledge the reality of that evil and disorder with which the world so much abounds. The obstinate and intractable qualities of matter, we are told, are the observance of general laws, or some such reason is the sole cause which controlled the power and benevolence of Jupiter, and obliged him to create mankind and every sensible creature so imperfect and so unhappy. These attributes then are, it seems, beforehand taken for granted in their greatest latitude, and upon that supposition, I own that such conjectures may perhaps be admitted as plausible solutions of that ill phenomena. But still I ask, why take these attributes for granted, or why ascribe to the cause any qualities but what actually appear in the effect? Why torture your brain to justify the course of nature upon suppositions which, for aught you know, may be entirely imaginary, and for which there are to be found no traces in the course of nature? The religious hypothesis, therefore, must be considered only as a particular method of accounting for the visible phenomena of the universe. But no just reasoner will ever presume to infer from any single fact and alter or add to the phenomena in any single particular. If you think that the appearance of things prove such causes, it is allowable for you to draw an inference concerning the existence of these causes. In such complicated and sublime subjects, everyone should be indulged in the liberty of conjecture and argument. But here you ought to rest. If you come backwards at arguing from your inferred causes, conclude that any other fact has existed or will exist in the course of nature, which may serve as a fuller display of particular attributes, I must admonish you that you have departed from the method and reasoning attached to the present subject, and have certainly added something to the attributes of the cause beyond what appears in the effect. Otherwise, you could never, with tolerable sense of propriety, add anything to the effect in order to render it more worthy of the cause. Number 108. Where then is the odiousness of that doctrine which I teach in my school, or rather which I teach in my gardens? Or what do you find in this whole question wherein the security of good morals or the peace and order of society is in the least concerned? I deny a providence, you say, and a supreme governor of the world who guides the course of events and punishes the vicious with infamy and disappointment, and afterwards, and rewards the virtuous with honor and success in all their undertakings. But surely I deny not the course itself of events, which lies open to everyone's inquiry and examination. I acknowledge that, in the present order of things, virtue is attended with more peace of mind than vice, and meets with a more favorable reception from the world. I am sensible that, according to the past experience of mankind, friendship is the chief joy of human life, and moderation the only source of tranquility and happiness. I never balance between the virtuous and the vicious course of life, but am sensible that, to a well-disposed mind, every advantage is on the side of the former. And what can you say more, allowing all your suppositions and reasonings? You tell me indeed that this disposition of things proceeds from intelligence and design, but whatever it proceeds from the disposition itself, on which depends our happiness and our misery, and consequently our conduct and deportment in life, is still the same. It is still open for me, as well as you, to regulate my behavior by my experience of past events. And if you affirm that while a divine providence is allowed, and a supreme distributive justice in the universe, I ought to expect some more particular reward of the good and punishment of the bad, beyond the ordinary course of events, I here find the same fallacy, which I have before endeavored to detect. You persist in imagining that if we grant that divine existence for which you so earnestly contend, you may safely infer consequences from it, and add something to the experience order of nature, by arguing from the attributes which you ascribe to your gods. You seem not to remember that all your reasonings in the subject can only be drawn from effects to causes, and that every argument deducted from causes to effects must of necessity be a gross sophism, since it is impossible for you to know anything of the cause, but what you have antecedently not inferred, but discovered to full in the effect. Number 109. But what must a philosopher think of those vain reasoners who, instead of regarding the present scene of things as the sole object of their contemplation, so far reverse the whole course of nature as to render this life merely a passage to something farther, a porch which leads to a greater and vastly different building, a prologue which serves only to introduce the piece and give it more grace and propriety? Whence, do you think, can such philosophers derive their idea of the gods? From their own conceits and imagination, surely. For if they derived it from the present phenomena, it would never point to anything farther, but must be exactly adjusted to them, that the divinity may possibly be endowed with attributes which we have never seen exerted, may be governed by principles of actions which we cannot discover to be satisfied. All this will freely be allowed, but still, this is more possibility and hypothesis. We never can have reason to infer any attributes or any principles of action in him, but so far as we know them to have been exerted and satisfied. Are there any marks of a distributed justice in the world? If you answer in the affirmative, I conclude that, since justice here exerts itself, it is satisfied. If you reply in the negative, I conclude that you have then no reason to ascribe justice, in our sense of it, to the gods. If you hold a medium between affirmation and negation by saying that the justice of the gods at present exerts itself in part, but not in its full extent, I answer that you have no reason to give it any particular extent, but only so far as you see it at present exert itself. Number 110. Thus, I bring the dispute, O Athenians, to a short issue with my antagonists. The course of nature lies open to my contemplation as well as to theirs. The experienced train of events is a great standard by which we all regulate our conduct. Nothing else can be appealed to in a field or in the Senate. Nothing else ought ever to be heard of in the school or in the closet. In vain would our limited understanding break through those boundaries which are too narrow for our fond imagination, while we argue from the course of nature and infer a particular intelligent cause, which first bestowed and still preserves order in the universe. We embrace a principle which is both uncertain and useless. It is uncertain because the subject lies entirely beyond the reach of human experience. It is useless because our knowledge of this cause being derived entirely from the course of nature, we can never, according to the rules of just reasoning, return back from the cause with any new inference, or, making additions to the common and experienced course of nature, establish any new principles of conduct and behavior. Number 111. I observe, said I, finding he had finished his harangue, that you neglect not the artifice of the demagogues of old, and, as you are pleased to make me stand for the people, you insinuate yourself into my favor by embracing those principles to which, I have always expressed a particular attachment. But allowing you to make experience, as indeed I think you ought, the only standard of our judgment concerning this, all other questions of fact, I doubt not, but from the very experience to which you appeal, it may be possible to refute this reasoning which you have put into the mouth of Epicurus. If you saw, for instance, a half-finished building surrounded with heaps of brick and stone and mortar, and all instruments of masonry, could you not infer from the effect that it was a work of design and contrivance? And could you not return again from this inferred cause to infer new additions to the effect and conclude that the building would soon be finished and receive all the further improvements which art could bestow upon it? If you saw upon a stone shore the print of one human foot, you would conclude that a man had passed that way, and that he had also left traces of the other foot, though effaced by the rolling sands or inundations of the waters. Why then do you refuse to admit the same method of reasoning with regard to the order of nature? Consider the world and the present life only as imperfect as an imperfect building, which you can infer a superior intelligence, and arguing from that superior intelligence, which can leave nothing imperfect, why may you not infer a more finished scheme or plan, which will receive its completion in some distant point of space or time? Or not these methods of reasoning exactly? Are not these methods of reasoning exactly similar? And under under what pretense can you embrace the one while you reject the other? Number 112. The infinite difference of the subjects, replied he, is a sufficient foundation for this difference in my conclusions. In works of Hume and art and contrivance, it is allowable to advance from the effect to the cause, and returning back from the cause to form new inferences concerning the effect and examine the alterations which it has probably undergone or may undergo. So basically he's saying that humans are different and apart from nature, from the universe, from the cosmos. We are something entirely separate from that. He won't be the first one to say it. But what is the foundation of this method of reasoning? Plainly this, that man is a being whom we know by experience, whose motives and designs we are acquainted with, and whose projects and inclinations have certain connection and coherence, according to the laws which nature has established for the government of such a creature. When, therefore, we find that any work has proceeded from the skill and industry of man, as we are otherwise acquainted with the nature of the animal, we can draw 100 inferences concerning what may be expected from him. In these inferences will all be founded in experience and observation. But did we know man only from the single work of production which we examine, if it were impossible for us to argue in this matter, because our knowledge of all the qualities which we ascribe to him being in that case derived from the production, it is impossible they could point to anything further, or be the formation of any new inference. The print of a foot in the sand can only prove, when considered alone, that there was some figure adapted to it, by which it was produced. But the print of a human foot proves likewise, from our other experience, that there was probably another foot, which also left its impression, though effaced in time or other incidents. Here we mount from the effect to the cause, and descending again from the cause, infer alterations in the effect. But this is not a continuation of the same simple chain of reasoning. We comprehend in this case 100 other experiences and observations concerning the usual figure and members of that species of animal, without which this method of argument must be considered as fallacious and sophistical. Sophistical, as in sophistical. Number 113. Goodness gracious, I am tired. And I don't think I can finish this in the time I have left. The case is not the same with our reasoning from the works of nature. The deity is known to us only by its productions, and is a single being in the universe, not comprehended under any species or genus. From those experienced attributes or qualities, we can, by analogy, infer any attribute or quality in him. As the universe shews wisdom and goodness, we infer wisdom and goodness. As it shews a particular degree of these perfections, we infer a particular degree of them, precisely adapted to the effect which we examine. We further But further attributes or further degrees of the same attributes we can never be authorized to infer or suppose by any rules of just reasoning. Now, without some such license of supposition, it is impossible for us to argue from the cause to infer any alteration in the effect, beyond what has immediately fallen under our observation. Greater good produced by this being must still prove a greater degree of goodness, a more impartial distribution of rewards and punishments must proceed from a greater regard to justice and equity. Every supposed addition to the works of nature make an addition to the attributes of the author of nature, and consequently, being entirely unsupported by any reason or arguments, can never be admitted but as mere conjecture and hypothesis. The great source of our mistake in this subject and of the unbounded license of conjecture, which we indulge, is that we tacitly consider ourselves as in the place of the Supreme Being, and conclude that He will, on every occasion, observe the same conduct which we ourselves in this situation could have embraced as reasonable and eligible. But besides that ordinary course of nature may convince us that almost everything is regulated by principles and maxims that differ, maxims very different from ours. Besides this, I say, I must evidently appear contrary to all rules of analogy to reason, from the intentions and projects of men to those of beings so different and so much superior. In human nature, there is a certain experienced coherence of design and inclinations, so that when, from any fact, we have discovered one intention of any man, it may often be reasonable for experience to infer another, and draw a long chain of conclusions concerning his past or future conduct. But this method of reasoning can never have place with regard to a being so remote and incomprehensible, who bears much less analogy to any other being in the universe than the sun or a waxen taper, and who discovers himself only by faint traces of outlines, beyond which we have no authority to ascribe to him any attribute or perfection. What we imagine to be a superior perfection may really be a defect, or were it ever so much a perfection, the ascribing of it to the Supreme Being, where it appears not to have been really exerted to the full in his works, savor more of flattery and panegyric than of just reasoning and sound philosophy. All the philosophy, therefore, in the world, and all the religion, which is nothing but a species of philosophy, will never be able to carry us beyond the usual course of experience, or give us measure of conduct and behavior different from those which are furnished by reflections of common life. No new fact can ever be inferred from the religious hypothesis, no event foreseen or foretold, no reward or punishment expected or dreaded, but what is already known by practice and observation, so that my apology for Epicurus will still appear solid and satisfactory, nor have the political interests of society any connection with the philosophical disputes concerning metaphysics and religion. I don't know that song, Daniel Antonell. Sorry. I will finish this, okay? I'm tired. Let me take a water break. Thank you for reading with me, readers and scholars. Here we go with 114. There is still one circumstance, replied I, which you seem to have overlooked. Though I should allow your premises, I must deny your conclusion. I conclude that religious doctrines and reasoning can have no influence on life, because they ought to have no influence, never considering that men reason not in the same manner you do, but draw many consequences from the belief of a divine existence, and suppose that the deity will inflict punishment on vice and bestow rewards on virtue, beyond what appear in the ordinary course of nature. Whether this reasoning of theirs be just or not is no matter. Its influence on their life and conduct must still be the same, and those who attempt to disabuse them of such prejudices may, for aught I know, be good reasoners, but I cannot allow them to be good citizens and politicians, since they are free from one restraint upon their passions, and make the infringement of the laws of society in one respect more easy and secure. I don't have anything to play songs with. Sorry, Krishna. After all, I may perhaps agree to your general conclusion in favor of liberty, though upon different premises from those on which you endeavor to found it. I think that the state ought to tolerate every principle of philosophy, nor is there an instance that any government has surrendered in political interest by such indulgence. There is no enthusiasm among philosophers. Their doctrines are not very alluring to the people, and no restraint can be put upon the reasonings. But what must be of dangerous consequence to the sciences, and even to the state, by paving the way to persecution and oppression in points where the generality of mankind are more deeply interested and concerned. And this is 115, where 115 reads, "But there occurs to me," continued I, "with the regards of your main topic, a difficulty which I shall just propose to you without insisting on it, lest it lead into reasonings of too nice and delicate a nature. In a word, I must doubt whether it is possible for a cause to be known only by its effects, as you have all along supposed, or to be of so singular and particular a nature as to have no parallel and no similarity with any other cause or object that has ever fallen under our observation. It is only when two species of objects are found to be constantly conjoined that we can infer the one from the other, and where an effect presented which was entirely singular and could not be comprehended under any known species, I do not see that we could form any conjecture or inference at all concerning its cause. If experience and observation and analogy be indeed the only guides which we can reasonably follow in inferences of this nature, both the effect and cause must bear a similarity and resemblance to other effects and causes, which we know and which we have found in many instances to be conjoined with each other. I leave it to your own reflection to pursue the consequences of this principle. I shall just observe that, as the antagonists of Epicurus always suppose that the universe an effect quite singular and unparalleled, to be the proof of a deity, a cause no less singular and unparalleled. Your reasonings upon that supposition seem, at least, to merit our attention. There is, I own, some difficulty how we can ever return from the cause to the effect, and reasoning from our ideas of the former, infer any alteration on the latter, or any addition to it." And that is that. My readers and scholars, thank you for joining me. Please come back, read with me again. I love it when you read with me. I love to see you all. The new ones, the casual viewers, the old schoolers, my old friends from IRL.